Welcome, I'm Claire Shaeffer. This is the first in a series of couture techniques. Most of these techniques are relatively easy and they can be used in your everyday sewing. I will show you how the fly front zipper is set in haute couture. Once you have learned the couture method, you can experiment with shortcuts. But for those extra special designs, you will want to return to the haute couture method and follow it step by step. I learned this method when examining a pair of Yves Saint Laurent trousers, but I've seen it and a variety of variations on many designs. When worn, the fly placket looks like it was machine stitched. Instead, the overlap and underlap are top stitched at the outset. Then the zipper is sewn into an open placket by hand. This is surprisingly easy. When the zipper is open, you can see the inside of the trousers, the top stitching on the underlap, and the hand sewing at the edge of the zipper tape. This is a good opportunity to practice your hand sewing because it is on the inside of the garment and it does not have to be perfect. This is my finished sample. You will need a variety of needles and thread, maybe a needle threader and thimble, and of course a zipper. So let's get started. I always start with white thread for thread tracings. All basting threads are not alike. A soft, unfinished basting thread is best for thread tracings. These threads break easily when you pull them out. Breaking threads are very irritating, but if the basting thread is stronger than the machine thread, the basting thread will disturb the machine stitching when you pull out the bastings. My first choice is an imported thread that comes in hanks. I cut the hank at both ends so each strand is 26 inches long. I have already cut my white threads and they are the length I use for basting. If I make changes, I will use the yellow thread next. Here are 3 threads you can substitute if basting thread is not available. The substitutes include lightweight cotton machine threads such as Mettler's 60 weight 2-ply and Aurifil's 80 weight 2-ply. Cotton embroidery floss is also a good substitute. The embroidery floss is packaged with 6 strands twisted together. You use only 1 strand to baste. You will use long needles like darners or sharps for basting. I like darners or cotton darners because they have a large eye. Sharps have a small eye. I use sizes 7 to 10 depending on the fabric weight. The size 7 needles are a medium size. The size 10 needles are smaller, and I sometimes use a needle threader. Use short needles such as embroidery or betweens to sew the zipper permanently. Embroidery or crewel needles have a long eye. Betweens have a small eye. Betweens are also called quilting or tailor's needles. Easy threading needles have a variety of uses, but I use them for moving and hiding thread ends. Trust me, you will find them invaluable. I prefer all cotton thread when sewing natural fiber fabrics and small size microtex needles for woven fabrics. Generally, I prefer a size 70-10 needle. My philosophy is why make a big hole when a small hole works? Always stitch a sample before beginning the garment to be sure you have the right needle and thread. I would be remiss not to mention a thimble, but I recognize that it is not easy to find a thimble that fits and learn how to use it. Of course, you need a zipper. When zippers are on sale, buy zippers in the longest length. When you need a zipper, measure the zipper placket and add 1 inch. Cut off the bottom of the zipper and finish the cut in with overcast stitches or a binding like the zipper on the right. Zippers cut off at the top are only used on inexpensive garments. Notice the stitching at the top of the pink zipper. The ends have been stitched together. This is a ready-to-wear technique, which makes it easy to match the stitched line to the seam lines. Lastly, you will need a separator, which can be cut from a file folder. The separator can be any length and width. For the zipper placket, this separator is 3/4 of an inch wide by 9 inches. For this sample, I used a commercial pattern. Thread traced the grain lines, seam lines, center fronts, fold lines, and the top stitching line for the fly on the right side of the fabric. You can see that I use knots on the thread tracings. Generally, I try to baste without knots because it is easier to remove the bastings. On most commercial patterns, the fold line on the underlap is 1/2 inch from center front. On the YSL pants, the underlap fold is 1 inch from the center. If you want a 1-inch extension, you will have to adjust the left front pattern before you cut out the trousers. The thread tracing is complete. The fronts are wrong side up. The facings were not interfaced. You may want to add an interfacing for some fabrics. I used 2 different stays to show you the options. The stay on the right is seam binding. The one on the left is a strip of lightweight fabric. Before sewing the stays in place, measure the fold line on the pattern from the waist seam to the end of the placket. Mark both stays this length. Some fabrics stretch even on the lengthwise grain, so you want to be sure that your fold lines are precisely even. The seam binding has finished edges. Pin one edge to the fold line at the waist seam and the bottom of the placket. Pin the stay to the fold line carefully, easing the fabric if needed. Sew it permanently with short running stitches and matching thread, working carefully so the stitches don't show on the folded edge. If the stay is a lightweight selvage, pin and sew the finished edge of the selvage like seam binding. The fabric strip is 1/2 inch wide. It has unfinished edges. Center it over the fold line, pin it in place, easing if needed so the fold lines on both fronts are exactly the same length, and sew the stay permanently at the center with running stitches. With wrong sides together, stitch the crotch seam for about 2 inches with matching thread, beginning at the bottom of the zipper. At the beginning, use an easy threading needle to pull one thread to the other side, then tie a knot. You don't need a knot at the end. When you stitch the crotch, you will simply overlap the stitching. Fold under the facings at the opening and baste to hold them in place. Check to be sure the overlap facing is smooth and press lightly. Use large diagonal stitches to baste over the top stitching line. This will hold the layers together to prevent them from shifting when you top stitch. Use matching thread and a regular stitch length to top stitch the fly. Remove the bastings on the fly. Use an easy threading needle to pull the needle thread to the wrong side and knot the threads. Press lightly. The placket opening is now finished and it is time to set the zipper. Baste the zipper to the underlap and sew it permanently with short basting stitches and matching thread. In couture, zippers are rarely sewn with prick stitches or tiny back stitches. Baste or pin the placket closed. Insert the separator into the overlap between the front and front facing. Now you can sew the zipper to the facing without sewing into the trouser front. Pin the zipper to the facing so it won't slip when you baste. With the separator in place, baste the zipper to the facing. Use short running stitches to sew the zipper permanently. Before removing the separator, sew the edges of the zipper flat against the seam allowance with felt stitches to secure the zipper. The zipper is finished and the separator has been removed. Finish the trousers and wear them with pride. I'm Claire Shaeffer. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please join my channel and post a comment. If you enjoy sewing and fashion exhibitions, this is the channel for you.